There was nothing to look at from under the tree except Gatsby's enormous house, so I stared at it like Kant at his church steeple for half an hour. A brewer had built it in the early period craze a decade before, and there was a story that he'd agreed to pay 5 years' taxes on all the neighboring cottages if the owners would have their roofs thatched with straw. Perhaps their refusal took the heart out of his plan to found a family. He went into an immediate decline. His children sold his house with a black wreath still on the door. Americans, while occasionally willing to be serfs, have always been obstinate about being peasantry. The Great Gatsby. Hello and welcome to The Political Orphanage, a home for plucky misfits and problem solvers. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and I recently learned that private property can be legally haunted by ghosts. As in, you can buy a house, you own the house, it's your house. Nobody's saying you don't own the house. And yet, legally, you have to adhere to the wishes of some dead guy. Not because of my arch nemesis, Ouija boards, but because of my other arch nemesis, zoning. That's right, it's a zoning episode. I love this stuff. I apologize for nothing. I do apologize for swearing. I dropped the F-bomb a few times this episode. Parents, if you've got kids in the car. But that's only because I hate zoning and ghosts so much. But just in case you're not as fired up about zoning and density laws and ghosts as I am, let me tell you what we're going to plow into today. Racism, authoritarianism, how authoritarians use regulations on you to make money for them, and some sticky questions about how to navigate irritating things like HOAs and neighborhood covenants while also respecting contract law. That's what we're going to talk about right here on The Political Orphanage. My guest today is Chris Gannon, a new associate of mine, a new friend of mine that I've met in Austin. I was at a meetup here in Austin for zoning nerds about a fortnight ago and hit it off with Chris, who is not just a delightful person, but also a very knowledgeable person. And in my very nerdy way, I believe fighting the good fight for density and fighting over zoning. Chris, who are you? What do you do?
So thank you for the introduction. I'm Chris Gannon. I'm a local Austin architect. I'm working on a few fronts to build and, allow affordable housing in Austin, and abundant housing. I'm working with the AIA, that's the American Institute of Architects. I'm on their housing committee, and together with a few associates, we're helping the city to understand the ramifications of their new zoning ordinances, and we're helping with modeling.
I'm getting very excited about this because I am something of a zoning truther. I believe that overzoning is at the heart of so many problems in the country, not the least of which are homelessness, raising prices for everybody. And so I am fascinated by this. The thing that initially freaked me out / intrigued me, Chris, was apparently dead people get to have influence over your house, which I did not know. There's something called deed restrictions, which, as I understand it, is where you have a contract with a ghost where the ghost determines the size of your house or some crap like that. What is this?
A lot of houses are haunted. That's just the fact.
Yeah.
They're haunted by deed restrictions, and it is exactly that. It's dead people from the 20s and 40s and even earlier who get to tell you all kinds of things about what you can do with your property, how you can use your house. It's a vast subject, and I actually printed out a whole bunch of them because when you start a project, especially a residential project, the first thing you do, you get the survey, you get someone to come out and look at your land, measure where the trees are and all this, and dig up any deed restrictions that exist on the property. The most common type run with the land, which means it's an agreement that you sign into when you buy the land. It's a set of restrictions that come with the property. It's different from zoning. It actually is a precursor to zoning.
Because this is through contract law, right? Like zoning is something done usually at the municipal level. We're talking about a contract that you're entering apparently in perpetuity with dead people.
Correct. And a lot of them will have a clause that say, how do you get out of this?
Okay.
And it's like, you have to find every single person who's ever bought a property and make sure that, I believe it's 3/4. Well, the one that I was looking at most recently, it's 3/4 of all property owners of the subdivision have to agree on removing this one stipulation. That's the only way you can get out of it.
Okay.
Unless,
so before we dive deep, I just want to say this strikes me first glance as ridiculous. I'm not going to do your chores for you, dead person. I bought your house. You're dead. Go away. It does strike me a little bit like an easement. So when I worked for the house years ago, the member I started working for, who was very big on hunting, like one of the things that I dimly recall him pushing was like, if you've got a bunch of land, you can put an easement on it so that this land will, people can buy it for hunting purposes, but they can't build anything on it.
Sure.
So it's a way of sort of permanently saying the back 40 that we've got at our farm, we are going to give to the city or the state or whatever. We're putting an easement on it saying that you can use it for whatever purpose. You just can't build stuff, something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So deed restrictions come in a variety of different types. An easement, sometimes they're for hunting easements, like you're saying, but a lot of times they're for utilities. Like, we ran a wastewater pipe from the sewer to, a larger main, and it goes through your property. There's a 15-foot easement that sits on top of it.
Got it.
So we don't want you to build your swimming pool on top of our sewer main.
Okay.
Or anything. We don't want you to do anything there.
Or I suppose kind of like the city might say you can't build anything within X feet of the curb. Like you own that land.
Well,
but,
kind of. That would be more of a right of way.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff you got to wade through.
Well, with deed restrictions specifically, then,
yes.
Can you give some examples, and it could be from what you've printed out of I'm buying a house. Theoretically, I don't make enough money to buy a house, but let's say I had enough money to buy a house. I'm buying a house, and turns out there are deed restrictions. What am I going to be restricted to with this house that I'm purchasing?
Yes. Okay. Well, so a lot of things. First, I want to hit on one in North Austin. I'm working with the Austin Housing Finance Corporation to build density into their community land trust. We're looking at all these deed restrictions, or we're looking at these properties, and part of it is that you have to pull up the deed restrictions. Now, Austin zoning is for an SF3 lot, which is what these are, says that you have a front yard setback of 25 feet. So you can't build anything in the front 25 feet. Side yards of 5 feet and a backyard of 10 foot. We're using a program that Austin has. It's one of the most successful programs in the nation, by the way, of its kind. It's called Affordability Unlocked. And one of the things it does is it reduces the zoning setbacks. So when we sat down to look at these properties, we thought, oh, great. These are small lots. We can build more on it because we're using Affordability Unlocked. The properties that we're building will be sold at an affordable rate. This is going to be great. We'll be able to do more on this land than what we typically could. But then we opened up the deed restrictions, and baked into the deed restrictions, it says the property comes with a 25-foot front yard setback. This is not the zoning.
Gotcha.
This is the deed restriction.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, the city previously has said, you own this land, you can build a house on it, but you can't build it within X feet of the street or X feet of the backyard, which I also think is stupid, but I understand that's very common. And you guys convinced me, like, okay, what if instead of 25 feet, we do 20 feet? That way we can build more bedrooms or whatever, and we could build more dense. And the city went, all right, sounds fishy, but we'll do it. Great. And then you opened up the deed restriction, and it went, okay, also I, the dead guy, that am selling this to some guy way before you, not even the guy you're buying it from. The guy that first owned this deed has said, in perpetuity, even if you knock down the house and build a new house, it must be 25 feet from the curb.
Exactly. And not only that, there's a whole list of things here in this deed restriction. I have it right here, so I'm going to read from it.
Sure.
Item E, no part of the premises of property covered hereby ever shall be rented, leased, sold, demised, or conveyed to, or otherwise become property of, or into the possession of any persons other than white persons
Whoa.
of strict Caucasian blood.
Holy
printed
shit.
right here on the
Can I
deed
see this?
restriction. Yeah. Oh, I got a bunch of examples. That's not even the worst one. I got another one here.
Yeah, can you read the worst one? Because this is pretty bad. I got to say, like,
that's on
this,
the deed
This
restriction.
offends me on two levels, Chris.
Yeah.
This, I'm going to say primarily the racist bullshit, but secondarily, it's my private property. Fuck off. You're a ghost. You're a dead racist ghost. I'm not gonna do your racism for you. Go to heaven or go to hell, but fuck off. I'm gonna, like, if I want black people in my house, it's my house.
Yeah. Well, so I've got another one here, and I would love to crack into this one deeper because this one is pretty wild. This is in Cherrywood, a wonderful little neighborhood.
Nice neighborhood.
It's a conservation easement, which I'll crack into in a minute. But so this one says, no part of the premises shall ever be held for, rented to, or occupied by any person of African descent, provided, however, that this clause shall not prevent the employment of such persons as domestic servants.
This is a forward-thinking bigot.
And providing customarily accommodations for them on said premises. So, a black person can't own the place, but a black person can work there.
They can work there. They wanted to be clear on this. Look, we're not crazy. We understand that a black person might need to enter your house to do your laundry or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, it should be noted that on this one, the one that I just read, it's a 2-page document here. These older deed restrictions are not hefty like they are now. It's a small document, and all of it is printed right there in typewriter font.
Mm-hmm.
The one part that I just read, subclause F, was scratched out in pen, and there's something in like a big font that says this provision omitted. So all the other stuff that is going into this, we're not is still applying.
I have so many questions about. I have so many questions about ghost law. All right. So first question, I guess, like, practically speaking, is what's going on here that a guy was a bigot, and when he sold his house, he went, "I don't ever want a black person to live in this house." Or conversely, did like a bigot developer that was worried about black people driving down property prices, like, had 50 houses and sold it? Okay.
It's so much worse. So we have to get into the history on this. This all starts maybe post-Civil War, and really in the late 1800s, when there's a big migration of folks into cities. There's also a huge migration of immigrants into cities. And people are looking for, I should say, the wealthy Caucasian folks are looking for a way to separate themselves. And they're developing these little suburbs that are mostly reached by trains. This is sort of, again, a precursor to zoning, which takes hold in 1916, is sort of is considered the first zoning case. And then in 1926, we have Euclid, which is the
architect of our misfortune.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
you're talking about. Euclidean zoning ordinances, like Euclid, Ohio.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the Supreme Court decision that said zoning is a legal way to do land. Now, so that moved it away from deed restrictions and into zoning. So now municipalities could come in and say, we're going to listen to our most wealthy constituents and say, you can do industrial stuff over here. All of this is going to be residential, and sure, exclude anyone you want. 1 year later, in 1917, they said, actually, you can't do racist zoning. Sorry. So for a year, there was a bunch of racist zoning, and then they stopped.
And then they went, okay.
And then they said,
we won't do racist zoning.
Yeah.
We have noticed that black people like apartment buildings, so we're going to ban apartment buildings.
No, they don't do racist zoning, but they do racist covenants.
Got it.
And racist deed restrictions.
So they went, rather than zoning away black people, just our neighborhood through private contract law is going to make it to where, like, if a black person moves into the neighborhood, or I think the way they were doing it in a lot of places, as I understand it, was they wouldn't even specify the race. They just say, like, if you buy a house in this neighborhood, all of the other homeowners have to agree to you personally. That was
the original zoning, or that's how they got it by in zoning ways. In restrictive covenants and in deed restrictions, they were free to say whatever they wanted. They could say no Asians, no whatever. You could be as blatant as you wanted. Only Caucasians. You were asking was it one racist homeowner that did this or one racist developer who subdivided? The answer is so much worse. 90% of all homes and all properties that were subdivided had this clause in it or a similar clause from the post-war era to until 1948 when it was finally outlawed. 90%.
Okay, so in terms of where that comes from, let's. I think we're both on board with the bigotry thing being bad.
Yes, it is bad.
I'm going to step out and say listeners are probably of that opinion as well. Let's put a pin on that for a second. So, focusing on the clause that you first brought up of. Actually, this specifies 25 feet. I could see a situation where I, as a developer, am developing 50 lots in a neighborhood, and I am thinking of it as a neighborhood. I'm not thinking of it as an individual house that an individual is going to own. I'm thinking of I am developing a neighborhood that I'm going to sell piecemeal. As a coherent neighborhood, I want all of the homes to look neoclassical, or I want all of the homes to look American colonial. And so I'm going to put a clause in that to all of the homes that they have to somewhat comport with my aesthetic vision. And the people buying the houses presumably are buying the houses because they want to live in a American colonial aesthetic neighborhood, and they want all the other houses to kind of look that way. They don't want it hodgepodge. They want it to have a feel to it. So I'm assuming that in the non-racist parts, the benign parts are coming from that kind of thing of trying to maintain some sort of aesthetic cohesion.
Sort of, yeah. Although those can also be traced back to sort of racist intents as well. Again, a lot of the people who were buying into these subdivisions were trying to leave a more mixed neighborhood, a historical, diverse neighborhood, seeing these restrictions. Oh, you have to buy a large lot. Not only do you have to buy a large lot, but you can't do anything with half of it. So, okay. So only people who can afford twice as much land as they need can buy in. And, the developers weren't putting these clauses in because they were, obsessed with beauty and they wanted to create these beautiful neighborhoods. Maybe they did, but really they would sell for more if they came with a bunch of deed restrictions that said, we're not going to let this neighborhood fall into, whatever people were afraid of.
Right. Okay.
No apartments. In fact, the Euclid case specifically identified apartments as parasites.
Wow.
Oh yeah. If you read Euclid, it's a nuisance and a parasite of the neighborhood. So this is the era that we're in. It's like, we don't want a bunch of immigrants coming in and living in apartments. We want, clean, white neighborhoods. This is what, and of course,
again, they can work in the house. We're not monsters.
Yeah, right.
If the black people need to, shine our shoes and things, we'll let them in legally.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but I guess just to clarify this, and we can move on from this. In the first house you mentioned where it said 25 feet, is that because one individual guy went, it is important to me that after I'm dead, this house maintains it? Or was that like there's a base template from a subsidy developer that goes, I'm thinking of this as a neighborhood in terms of prices or aesthetics or something. So it's probably that with most of these. It's not.
It's the guy that subdivided it. It's the guy that bought the land, and it's called the one I'm looking at, and the first one I told you, I think it's called Dixie Acres maybe, and it's a large tract in North Austin neighborhood. It just blends into all the other neighborhoods at this point, but at one time they had bought a big piece of virgin land and subdivided it and said, on this subdivision, these are the rules.
Okay, this at least makes a bit more sense to me, because if it were like, people get very attached to their homes. Mm-hmm. And if a homeowner was like, I'm going to sell you my home, but only under the condition you never repaint it because it's important, like, that to me would be crazy.
Oh, I got crazy.
It sounds like this is more of a sub-developer going, I want all the houses to look this way because I have some aim for the neighborhood.
The aim for the neighborhood is that he makes a lot of money. Right. And he sells it to people who are looking for suburbia. Mm-hmm. So on the other one, the crazy that you're talking about, so I have another project just down the street, and what that has is a conservation easement. So this is one guy who has lived in the house. Austin is filled with good-intentioned old hippies who were fighting a battle of environmentalism before any of us were, around. And that battle has changed. The front of that battle has changed. And now a lot of the things that they were pushing for, if you look back on it, It's like, oh, actually, that has caused a lot of sprawl and a lot of environmental damage to the rest of the city. So maybe in the narrow view, and this gets into NIMBYs, right? There's a lot of left-leaning NIMBYs who have good intentions of environmentalism, and they say, think about the land. You can't put so many people on this land because you're going to cut down on the trees and you're going to trash
we
the
got to
land.
maintain trees, or like we got to have like enough grass to drain the water, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by not letting people develop inside the city and densify the city, you're pushing them to sprawl, and
you're driving up prices.
You're driving up, for sure. You're driving up prices, but just on the environmental front. If you're pushing people out of the city into the suburbs come with a much larger minimum lot size. Right. I mean, we're talking like half acre, 2 acres, 4 acres, some places. There's a place just outside of New York City. There is a neighborhood that has a 40-acre minimum lot size. Think about that. You could put an entire University of Texas on it.
Yeah, 40 acres is a lot of land.
That's
that's outside of New York City, so it's like Westchester or something like that. That's per stupid wealthy right there, by the way. That is some hedge fund money there.
It's stupid wealthy. If you're pushing people out of the city where, and I'd love to get into this more too, the minimum lot size in Austin in 1931 was 3,000 square feet. In 1948,
how big of an acre is that? Because I don't know how to go from feet to acres. Like quarter acre?
No. Like it would be like a 24th of an acre.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fine.
3,000 square feet. There's 3,000 square feet houses all over the place.
Yeah,
3,000 square feet is a fine amount, and it allows for a smaller footprint. But in 1948, the city upped it to the current minimum lot size. 5,750. So it's
from an environmental position, or from
let's get back to the environmental.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole other.
I might be an old hippie who's selling my home. I'm about to go across the Rainbow Bridge to hang out with Lenny Kravitz. No, not Lenny Kravitz. I don't know, some other dead hippie. I'm going to hippie heaven in a little bit. I'm selling
Jerry Garcia.
Jerry Garcia.
You're definitely going to go see Jerry Garcia.
I'm going to go see Jerry Garcia across the Rainbow Bridge and do LSD in the great beyond. And before I sell my house, because I want to do the right thing, I'm going to put a permanent restriction on it that you can't make it dense, because I see density as counterposed towards environmentalism for some reason.
Yes,
okay.
which when you, in the immediate, when you're just looking at your lot and you say, I want this blade of grass to remain, then you don't want someone to build something on it. But if you think, well, then where are they going to build? They're going to go out into the suburbs and build on an acre.
It's going to sprawl out. We're going to end up taking more land. Right. It's going to be less efficient land. Cities are less ecologically harmful than because you've got people living vertically in sky rises and stuff, and they're able to double up on resources. Utilities are less. They tend to have less of an ecological footprint per person. Density is better for the environment than sprawl is.
Exactly. So I have one called a conservation easement, and this is in Cherrywood. It's funny. The guy here went all around Texas, and it's amazing. His property is amazing. It's a large lot, and he went all around Texas and collected plant species from all over Texas and brought them back. He has over 100, it's like over 300 different plant species all over, and he has 4 different ecoregions all nestled into his property. Now, this property is, it's all grown up and all grown in. And if you just look at it without a Texas ecologist's eye, you would say, whoa, this is a super densely wooded, shrubby property that looks like a piece of wilderness was just cut out of some storybook and placed. Oh my God, there's a house in there too. This must be a witch's house, or there's a little gingerbread boy who's trying to escape from this house or something. It's funny that it's in the middle of Cherrywood, which is a kind of a nice urbane kind of Austin neighborhood. So a friend of mine bought it, and we're looking at what we can do with it. In the conservation easement, it says, no cutting, no plant can be removed from this property that is here now. That's not no bush, no anything. And the paths that have been created through here, so there's little stone paths, they must be maintained and swept, and it has to be watered at a certain rate. It's what's called an affirmative covenant, that you have to do these things. Not that you can't do these things, not like you can't build in the front yard.
Right.
You can't have minorities come live with you. It's not a restrictive.
You have to actively water and take care of these plants. Okay.
Yes.
So, all right. Weird story.
Mm-hmm.
My buddy Hepburn, a few years ago, went to some event with Johnny Wiseau, who is the director of The Room. Have you seen The Room?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Really weird film, right? Weird guy. So Johnny Wiseau, I don't know, it was a screening or something, and he sells books about it, or I don't know what happened. Hepburn buys a book and somehow gets his email on this list. And then like 3 months later gets an email from Johnny Wiseau that's like, we actually sold those books at the wrong price. We sold them to you for 12. It's actually 20. Can you please send us 8? And Hepburn was like, no, we're done here. We've already made this transaction. I'm not sending you more money because you changed your mind about this. This is very much how I feel about everything you've described right now. All of these clauses you bring up, my immediate response is, you're dead. You're a ghost. We do not have a relationship with one another. The moment that you gave me the keys and I signed that line, this became my private property. So, all right. Okay. Follow-up question then. Because we've got 3 ways this can creep in now. We've got racism. We've got just trying to jack up the price through, minimum lot size, aesthetics, things like that. And we've got conservation. I, as a homeowner, when I buy this house in Sherwood, now I probably would keep all of that land there.
Yeah.
By the way, I like trees and stuff, so I probably why I'm buying it is because I want those plants. But all the same, let's say I've got to chop down some tree for some reason, right? And I'm going through my document, and I see I'm not allowed to have black people in the house, and also I can't cut down any trees. I think I would go, you're dead. I don't care. And I would do it anyway. Who's going to catch me? What's the enforcement mechanism with a dead person? Does the ghost come to the courthouse and they whip out a Ouija board and like convince the judge to punish me? How do they know that I'm not agreeing to this bullshit agreement with a ghost?
Well, you'll be haunted with rattling chains every night.
I already am. That's why I drink.
No, that's a great question. That is a great question because this is a civil contract. It's between 2 parties. The city isn't enforcing it.
Because it's contract law.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's contract law with a ghost.
Contract law with a ghost. So what you have to do is you have to sue. It can only be enforced through lawsuit.
Okay, because it's contract law.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a famous case here in Austin. I don't know if it's famous. I followed it very closely on 3000 Funston Street. Have you heard of this one?
No.
Okay. So the Austin Housing Finance Corporation was created in the 70s when cities were no longer allowed to make social housing. There's a lot of housing finance corporations throughout the entire country that were created around the same time. What ours does is amongst other things, is it runs a community land trust, which is where they own the land and they'll sell the houses at a much lower rate, but they keep the land. So people can come in, buy the houses. They don't see as much appreciation in value, but they're not throwing their money away in terms of renting. So it's a nice in-between step between renting, which is not bad, and homeownership, which...
This is fascinating. I want to come back to this because this is a really interesting idea.
It's a community land trust. It's an excellent model. We need to see much, much, much more of it. There are definitely drawbacks too, because if someone gets stuck in a community land trust home that they're not able to sell, then they're just not creating wealth in a way that if they had bought a house with a piece of land attached, they would be creating, or they'd be realizing a whole bunch of wealth. The Austin Housing Finance Corporation bought a tract of land in Bryker Woods, which is a wealthy neighborhood west of Austin on 3000 Funston Street. And all the lots to one side of it and all the lots to the other side of it all have single family homes on it. And their intent was to build one single family home that would be sold to a poor person.
Right.
They're
not even looking to build a parasitical apartment complex.
No parasites.
They're building a single family home. The differentiation here is that the trust owns the land,
yes.
And the poor person presumably owns the house because they're only buying the house. It's going to be cheaper than buying the house and the land.
Exactly.
Got it.
That's
Okay.
precisely it. And it's a way to create affordable housing that is affordable in perpetuity, because when they sell the house, they'll sell it for a little bit over what they bought it for, but not a lot. So someone else can get in there, just buy the house. Unless the house falls apart, unless they destroy the house, then they're losing money. But the neighbors, who are lawyers and wealthy and retired, pulled out their deed restriction and said, hey, actually, your deed says that you need to have this much square footage, and you don't have that much square footage. Now you look around to either side of them, and all the houses up and down the street are on the same size lot as 3000 Funston. What happened was Mopac came in through their backyard, and they took a little bit off of the backyard of all of these homes, reducing the size of the lot.
Mopac being a highway.
Mopac is the highway. Yeah, not the Twitter personality, but the actual highway came in and, ate up a little bit of their backyard, just like they did all up and down the street. Now, because their lot is now less than the minimum lot size that's prescribed through their deed restriction, they got hit with this lawsuit from a neighbor trying to protect his property value and, keep poor people out of his neighborhood. And they won. They beat the Austin Housing Finance Corporation. It was years of battle with lawyers. I mean, they spent so much money just trying to build one single family home, and they got shot down.
Okay, so it sounds like the enforcement mechanism here is not, because I figured, I guess it'd be easier to run afoul of this if it's the conservation one, because maybe that is just one guy's house that has nothing to do. But if it's a neighborhood covenant, if it's a subdivision, and we all have the same basic deed restriction template, all of us are operating under the same things, and your house is afoul of that. I don't even need to look at your deed, because I can go, I know your deed is the same as my deed, and I'm looking at it right here, and it says you have to have X amount of feet, and you don't have that, so I'm going to sue you for breach of contract. And that's how the enforcement mechanism is basically other people in the neighborhood that have access to the same legal restriction knowledge, taking them to court and saying, court, you've got to influence, or you've got to enforce this contract law.
Correct. So, it's a total grab bag. There's some deed restrictions in some neighborhoods that are completely ignored, and people violate them all the time because it's something that collectively the neighborhood has just agreed to ignore. And it doesn't even have to be explicit.
Black people would be one of them,
well,
right?
No.
Presumably, this a listener to the Nick, who listens to the show. Hey, Nick, he's in Austin. I think he told me that his deed has one of these bigoted restrictions in it, and Nick's a great guy. He would just ignore that. I don't think that if he was going to sell his house to a black guy, he'd take it to court and be like, "Now we got to work this." I think he would just sell it and they'd move on.
No. So this is actually crucial, because this is a template for how we can unlock these properties from these onerous deed restrictions. It took the Supreme Court to step in and say racial restrictions are not enforceable.
Okay.
So it's not about saying it's illegal to put them in. It's about saying you're not allowed to enforce them.
This is good. So if you are a bigot, you can put these in.
Sure, put it in.
You're basically just making a resolutional statement about how you felt at the time of purchase or the time of sale. It's not enforceable on people.
Yeah.
But the minimum lot sizes, the house has to be pastel. I don't know. We're in Florida, so it has to be pink or whatever. The roof has to be made out of black vinyl as opposed to whatever those things are. That stuff's enforceable as long as it's not overtly racist.
Yes, exactly. Well, as long as they are enforceable. Exactly. So,
okay. Can you get out of it? Because if it's with two questions. First of all, is the contract with the dead guy or the neighborhood? Because if it's with a neighborhood, I can at least see the utility in this because it's other living people. If it's a dead person, screw you, you're dead. I don't care. You can enjoy Jerry Garcia. I'm not doing this for you. If it's with all the neighbors and we've all kind of formed this miniature social contract that we've bought into, then I at least understand the philosophical concept behind it.
So the majority runs with the land. It's a restriction that comes with the land. It's not a contract you have with the neighborhood or anything. It's just this land has these restrictions on it, and you agreed to it when you bought the property.
Okay, so that's stupid bullshit. How do I get out of it?
Okay, so how do you get out of it? Great question. In one of these that I have here, it has the way you get out of it. In fact, the one in North Austin, it says, I believe in that one, it says 3/4 of the neighborhood has to come together. 3/4 of the property owners of the subdivision. And if 3/4 of the people say, we don't want to abide by this rule anymore, then the rule's gone. In other cases, I think that Texas has a clause. I believe that if 2/3, unless it's prescribed, that 2/3 of the property owners of a subdivision, if they all vote to remove one of these restrictions, it's removed. They can also add restrictions in there as well, collectively. I think. Now, don't send your lawyers after me. I'm not a lawyer. So that's how you can get out of them. The other way, which is what a lot of organizations and advocates are currently trying to do, is make them unenforceable through statewide measures. So large lots. Let's dive into large lots real quick, because why did Austin go from 3,000 to 5,750?
I don't know.
Yeah, and why in 1948? I'll tell you why. Because that's when you weren't allowed to restrict minorities and black people from your neighborhood. So they said, okay, well, if we can't just say it, how do we say it without saying it?
Right.
So there was a huge push in the late 40s to go from, a normal lot size to a larger lot size. And actually, they've done studies that 8,000 square feet was about nationally, 8,000 square feet was about the breaking point of people could still afford it, but it would restrict immigrants and minorities and general poor people. So 8,000 square feet. What is Austin's average lot size? It's 50 by 150, which is about 7,500.
Wow.
So we're right there.
Okay. They were working hard to make sure that the affluent white people were taken care of at the expense of everybody else. Okay, I've got a follow-up question for you. So we're talking about two different things. Or we've been talking about deed restrictions this episode, not talking about zoning so much. When it comes to zoning, I'm very much I stand with Alain Berthoud. I'm very much in favor of emergent order, and the state, in the broad sense, has a vested interest in negative externalities and safety, but otherwise should back away, right? So I'm fine with the city saying bedrooms have to have a window because that's a safety feature in the event of a fire. That doesn't bother me. What I am bothered by is a state saying there have to be 15 windows, or the windows have to be X big, or minimum lot sizes are a great example, because minimum lot sizes exist explicitly to make the land worth more. And one of the weird things people keep forgetting is if you use the law to increase the value of land, it also increases the price of the land. And that's why houses cost a lot right now. So I like to get slightly inflammatory here. The economic system where you own your private property, but we tell you what to do with it, is called fascism. And I think that zoning is straight up fascist in the United States, and I'm against it 90% of the time. Noting all of that, that is different than private contract law. So like I can conceive of a situation where me and my eccentric millionaire friends decide we want to have a neighborhood where all the houses look like tiny Scottish castles. And we're going to form a contract with each other that if you move into our neighborhood and you buy one of our houses, you can't make your house look like anything other than a Scottish castle. So I can understand the impetus to some extent of, look, it's like there are no doubt people that aren't racist that are like, look, we want our neighborhood to look like bungalows or whatever. And we moved into the neighborhood because we want our houses to look like bungalows, and we don't want people to buy it up piecemeal and turn it into something else. Should we not have some mechanism where people can opt into our society and we keep it that way?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to go back and say, I don't think that the people who live in bungalows or tiny Scottish castles are racist.
Yeah.
We're dealing with laws that were put down and practices that were put down, almost 100 years ago. In 3 years, we're going to be at the 100th anniversary of Euclid, right? 100th anniversary.
Listeners, get ready for a special on that one.
Yeah, right? Hopefully we'll have some changes by then. But anyways, so the the ethos of the nation has changed, and I dearly don't want this to come off as an attack on people who live in single family homes or enjoy big yards. It's not. They are not the racists.
I don't think they're racist, but I will say, because this is something that I get flack on. Like I'll do these episodes sometimes and people are like, yeah, freedom. And then I'll be like, and also you shouldn't be able to restrict the size of your neighbor's house. And then I'll get a few emails that are like, I'm generally in favor of freedom, but my wealth is in my house and I'm totally in favor of restricting my neighbors. And I'm like, well, thanks for outing yourself as a hypocrite. So I don't think you're being a racist, mind you. I think most of the people I think that is a bygone era, but I do have a very big problem saying I am going to use the force of state to restrict somebody else's private property rights in order to make my property cost more. I have a big moral problem with that.
I agree. And I think that I love the idea of creating a neighborhood of Scottish castles. In fact, there is a neighborhood of it's not Scottish castles, but it's these little, they're like crystalline and white, and it's abandoned. It's somewhere.
What?
I feel like it's in Czechoslovakia.
Oh, I would love to go to the abandoned White Castle neighborhood.
Oh my God, it's incredible. It's an entire neighborhood filled with these tiny little white castles. Just like, think about like a modern suburb of like cul-de-sacs and just rows and rows and rows of identical houses. Replace those little houses with like tiny magic kingdoms. That's exactly what it is. Turrets and everything. Wow. What a cool spot. I mean, what if you did a neighborhood that was all...
By the way, I have really bad news about Czechoslovakia, though. I don't want to ruin your day, Chris, but it actually folded up a few years ago. Yeah, you know what? It's not important. It's not important to our show. I'm sorry to hear about this neighborhood and the nation state in which it appears.
I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to not cancel my plans to the Czechoslovakia that I've already bought 2 decades ago.
Yeah. Forward planning trip.
That's right. Exactly. Imagine that you had like a neighborhood where every house had to be in the shape of, an animal or something. It'd be so funny.
Yeah. So how do we? Like, I would much prefer people do private contract law than zoning, because at least with private contract law, it is an agreement that I'm opting into with another person. We're negotiating in some capacity, and we're agreeing to it. I'm very much in favor of private property and you being able to do what you want with it in voluntary relationships, right? So contract law is not. I'm so much more in favor of that at arriving at a conclusion than zoning, where we are the group is restricting other people regardless of what they did with it.
Right.
Noting that I'm philosophically okay with this, I am experiencing some cognitive dissonance right now. And that if you were to come in and if we kicked off the episode with you going, Heaton, would you be okay with 3 or 4 homeowners making contracts with each other to make their houses look a certain way? I would have said, absolutely. That's voluntary cooperation between willful parties. It does seem to me that has gotten out of hand in terms of anti-density measures that have had a aggregately negative effect on home prices, homelessness, things like that. If it were up to you, what would you tweak about the system to try to arrive at an ideal outcome while preserving human freedom?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's kind of the nut of the issue. Because if you look at Houston, that is what they did. They said they released a lot of in 1993, they removed zoning altogether. So everyone holds up Houston as this city without zoning. But what it does have is it has a lot of neighborhoods that have opted into deed restrictions and
covenants.
Yeah, there's still mechanisms of control in Houston. But if you look, one of the biggest things that they did was they reduced the minimum lot size. I think in the 3 years after they did that, there was thousands of new homes that popped up. If we look at Minneapolis, which has also tried to do a lot of pro-housing moves, and they were kind of an early one to adopt these measures. One of their first moves was that they allowed 3 units by right on every lot. Now, this is important because Austin is on the precipice of doing this as well. But they didn't really do anything else. And I think in the first 3 years of that program, they built 104 units. So that's not a lot. That isn't a lot.
So, okay, because I'm between a rock and a hard place right now where I am super pro-density, super pro-YIMBY. Again, I'm throwing the word fascist out, which I don't normally do, but I do think zoning laws tend to be fascist by like an economic definition. And I am also in favor of private property, voluntary contract law, right? So
Right.
I'm in a hard place. So it's kind of the idea of like, if you're going to have to kind of remove people's abilities to do what they want with their land, it's better to err on the side of density of like, look, it's just in the city of Austin, you can absolutely do your private contract stuff and you can say that the houses have to be pink in your neighborhood and everybody agrees on that, but we're going to put a law in place saying everybody can build an accessory dwelling unit, and this is preemptive over whatever covenants you're doing. So you have to abide covenant law. You have to make your bungalow pink, and you have to have cactuses in your yard because everybody in the neighborhood's done this. But everybody has a supererogatory right to build an accessory dwelling unit in the back if they want it, because we think that density is more important than these other things. Is that kind of where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of dodge your question last time you asked me, because it's a tricky question, and I think the way that I see it is that it's less of a top-down sort of philosophical look at it, and more of a we're in the weeds, and we're trying to make these incremental changes. We see where we're getting hung up. We see where the pain points are. How do we lessen those pain points? Minimum lot size is a excellent tool. So, if we
and for the record, if you get rid of minimum lot sizes, you as a property owner can absolutely buy however much property you can afford and you want and put one house there. If you want to buy 30 acres and put a house there, you can do that, but you have to be the one to front the money for it. And if it really bothers you that the other houses in the neighborhood are going to be, 2 acres, you are absolutely at liberty to purchase them.
Exactly.
What you can't do is use the force of law to compel other people to do what you want. That's where this stops.
Right. I think that's exactly it. Is that we're not saying that you have to live on a 2,500 square foot lot and that you have to have 3 units on your lot. No one is saying that. And I think is where I think that what we're doing is the right way to do it. Right now, we're looking at allowing 3 units per lot through the whole city. So this is, this is getting rid of the single family. You're only allowed to build 1 unit on your lot, and it's saying, you know what, 3 units should be fine. Next step.
Does that mean house or accessory dwelling unit or triplex or just anything that means 3 families could live here?
We're in the weeds of that right now. Okay. Because right now we have rules regarding duplexes. We have rules regarding ADUs. That's an accessory dwelling unit. How it is in relation to the primary unit. We have rules regarding primary units. With a third unit, is that now a third typology that we got to figure out, like some arbitrary rules on how 3 units, or should we just get rid of all of this language about ADUs and duplexes, and should we just say 3 units are 3 units? If you want a primary and 2 little back homes, build it. That's fine. If you want a stacked triplex, every unit is the same. These are very common. This is what the Boston triple decker, what really built out Boston is the Boston triple decker. And it's a stacked triplex. These are very difficult and not profitable to build here because you are pushed into a different building code. And up until now, if we can pass this 3 units, you had to have multifamily to build a triplex. And if you have multifamily, you're not going to build a triplex. You're going to build like as much as you can because multifamily lots are going for a lot. So economically, a triplex was the least profitable. But you know what? They fit into the neighborhood nicely. You can put three families in them. If you stack them, you find a lot of efficiencies in that 1 roof, 1 foundation. Stack your bathrooms, stack your kitchens. I'm on a personal crusade to bring stacked triplexes to Austin. There's none. There's none in Austin. Although you go to Buffalo or Boston or New York City or any of these older cities, they're wonderful. They fit into the neighborhood really nicely. They look just like a large single family home, but they have 3 families in them. My sister lives in one. In fact, my father in Buffalo, he and I restored one. There's nothing magical or tricky in there that has to be in the IBC building code. That's the commercial building code. It's built just like I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis because there's probably some fire safety issues that we need to work through. But anyways, they should be built more, and they're not. And how do we get more stacked triplexes? So what I'm looking to do, or what I think that we should be pushing to do, is do these small incremental steps that make it easier for folks to build missing middle style housing. And that's more density than a single family house, but less density than like a large apartment complex. And right now we're incentivized to build one or the other.
Well, I mean, I think on the city level, I do not think there should be lot restrictions, period. Where I get sticky is when we're getting into private contract law, covenants, things like that, where a group of homeowners have decided. Like the one that pops into my mind now is, so let's say we go with the heat and shooting from the hip plan, which is by law, you can always have 3 family dwelling units on your property. It's preemptory over any type of contract law. Okay. What next happens is a guy parks 2 very old RVs in his front yard, and grass grows up in front of them. It's an eyesore. It looks like he's got a derelict vehicles there, and the neighborhood goes, "Hey, we have a covenant here that says you can't park cars in your front lawn. This is hurting property value for all of us." And he goes, "Hey, the law is I can build these 2 other units, and it's preemptory." Then I'm like, okay, I understand why. I understand why neighborhoods would need some mechanism to stop not density, but just a ne'er-do-well from driving down property value. Of like, you have to maintain paint on your house. You can't put a boat in your front yard. Any vehicles that you're working on have to be completed within 2 years or something like that, so you don't have the permanent. I'll fix. No, I'm going to fix that Buick. That guy.
I'm feeling personally attacked right now, but okay, go on.
I guess what I'm saying is I can understand having some mechanisms for like just dereliction being dealt with by contract law. And I'm still not entirely sure how I can allow people to voluntarily come together, form a neighborhood, have rules in place to maintain some level of aesthetic decorum or just aesthetic continuity, and at the same time not take on all of these negative features that we've discussed in today's program that are anti-density. And I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a tricky question.
Yeah. I honestly, I think I'm coming down on the side of, we're just going to put in pro-density law, because it's gotten so it's become so abusive, it's gotten so out of hand that I'm more inclined to do that, and get rid of, basically cut down the homeless person population and risk that someone has to have, an accessory dwelling unit in their neighbor's yard that they all agreed they wouldn't do. I'm more inclined to do that. Although patrons, I welcome your feedback, given that significant amount of you are homeowners, unlike me, sort of different thing. I think I'll put a pin in that there, because we could keep going down this hall. Chris, it has been a pleasure talking to you. I could talk to you for hours. I hope to talk to you for hours in the future.
Yeah, definitely. This has been super fun.
Well, thank you for coming over. Thank you for your time. Where can people find you if they want to follow up on any of the things we've discussed? Are there any resources you would point them to?
So, an architecture practice, Shams Gannon Architecture. It's me and my wife, Layla Shams. So you can definitely find us at shamsgannon.com. That's our website.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Great chat, Heaton. Great chat, Chris. I could have talked to that guy for another hour about zoning. And in fact, I do. Chris sticks around for this week's bonus episode, which you can access by going to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton. Every week, there's a regular episode like you just heard, and there is a bonus episode enjoyed exclusively by patrons. So support the show, keep the lights on, and get yourself some extra content. Go to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton. That's patreon.com/Andrew Heaton. Thanks. That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Chris Gannon, for coming on to discuss deed restrictions and ghosts. Thank you, Eric Stipe, who edited today's program. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.